Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on this nice, chilly morning. I'd like to welcome everybody to the UCCE Master Gardener Program of Riverside County and the Western Water Efficient Landscaping Workshop. Your hosts today are me, Jeffrey Diaz. I'm a staff here at Western Water, and Rosa Elias from Master Gardener. Rosa will be presenting our speaker today, along with some words.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey. I am actually going to pass the baton to Melody. Melody is a master gardener for Riverside County, and she's offered to help out and do the presentation of our speaker and just kind of be our monitor for this session. So, Melody.
Of course, when you say that, my phone decides to go off. But let me say, Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to our first workshop, our Wells workshop of the year. And I'm looking forward to having a whole bunch more and that you guys join us on the other ones that we have coming up. Today we have Lynn. Make sure I'm getting everybody's name right. I want to call you Lynn Kaufman and instead of Miss Hoffman, but it's Lynn Kaufman. She's been a master gardener with us since 2017. So we're in for a really big treat listening to her today speak on the removal of turf and turf design. But before I get into that, I kind of want to talk about a couple of other things. First of all, I would like to mention a few of our Master Gardener events throughout Riverside. And today we're having an extremely busy day out there in the community working and doing what is that we do, communicating to the community about the different things that the Master Gardeners do, things that are happening in your garden. So we are trained volunteers that offer science-based information and who advise and educate the public on gardening and horticulture. Our information tables, Ask the Master Gardener, are often available at farmers markets throughout Riverside County, Corona, Temecula, Vale, and Promenade, Moreno Valley, Murrieta, and downtown Riverside. So if you are going to be in the desert area, please look for us at the farmers markets in Palm Springs or La Quinta. On the first Saturday of the month, our CRCD has a Master Gardener table available to the public at this location. It is a public land use learning center, and we invite you to tour the 3-acre demonstration garden of sustainable practices. So instead of me holding you guys up and talking about everything, I'm going to go ahead and speak really quick about Lynn. Lynn Kaufman actually was one of our coordinators for the Speakers Bureau. So you're in for an excellent treat when she's going to explain to you about irrigation, which is actually going to be on the second workshop. So make sure you tune in on the second one as well. Lynn, I'm going to do a brief description of you, and then I'm going to let you talk about your own stuff, if that's okay.
That'd be great.
Okay, so Lynn is a 4-year University of California Riverside County Extension Master Gardener and a QUEL, QWEL, certified qualified water efficient landscaper. She was raised on a farm in the Midwest and began her adult horticulture career in wholesale, retail, herb specialty nursery in San Diego County. She has also worked as a contract employee for Inland Empire Waterkeepers and several Inland Empire water districts to assist homeowners to improve water use with their existing irrigation systems. So currently she is an independent landscape coach for homeowners looking to transform their water thirsty landscapes into water wise oasis. So please join me in welcoming Lynn Kaufman to the program. Yay!
Thank you,
over, Lynn.
Yeah, we're working on a little technical handoff here, so you will have to hear me say next slide because we have to have someone else do that. So bear with me on that. I'm sorry for that. I think we have a reasonably smaller group than typical, and so I'm hoping that you'll have questions that you can put into the chat box. And then, if something looks really relevant or is confusing, Melody, break in and ask that question, certainly. Okay. But we're going to kind of try to hold them in little groups along the way so that I'm not interrupted too much, so I can get through what I want to talk about. So I'm going to do something a little unusual and ask how many of you, and type into the chat box, please, so that Melody can kind of get a sense. How many of you presently are using native plants in your gardens? it looks. Have you gotten a number of answers yet, Melody?
No, I have one lady who said yes, but I think
Okay.
everyone else is probably trying to get their answers in there. Or maybe we should just put it out there to the public really quick so they can raise their hand or something. And maybe I need to wake everyone else up out there. I know it's early, I know it's on a Saturday, and you know, you don't get drunk Friday, you get drunk Saturday. So, but no, I only got one response so far, but yeah, so any.
Yeah, I'm gonna just say, because depending on where people are in their gardening experience, kind of depends on how I want to talk about things. So, I'm going to, start with basics, which is always a good thing, because A, it can be just a review. And B, if you are inexperienced with native plants, it gives you a place to start. But if it turns out I'm getting a little too basic, please someone chime into the chat and I might be able to raise it a level or so. Because I want you to get what you need out of this conversation. Really hope it is. So we got another one that says someone's using ornamental. So we may have a bit of a mixed group, which would be terrific. So we'll all learn together on this. Can you do the next slide, please? Oh, we skipped a slide. Huh. Well, we'll skip the slide. So I want to talk about this as, oops, you're going too fast. There, let's stay there. Has turf become a four-letter word? I think is an appropriate question. There's a fair amount of controversy over the use of turf. I'm sure you've all heard that the turf replacement program is incentivizing everyone to remove their turf. And the reason they're doing that is because grass is the thirstiest plant on earth. And we actually don't live where temperate climates, which is what the lawn aesthetic was in Southern California, or all of California, for a good 50 to 75 years. And so the reality is that we're taking a second look at, is turf serving us both aesthetically and for the use of limited water resources that we have here in the state. And that is not getting better over time. It's getting less good and less consistent and reliable. So we need to be thinking about our yards and our property in a different way. In addition to the fact that it uses a lot of water, grass is often considered a form of a desert. When they talk about grass as a desert, what they mean by that is that it is a monoculture of all the same plant, and it doesn't attract very much, especially in mowed lawn, any wildlife. No pollinators, no birds, no bees, you don't see things very much in the yards doing anything. So it's kind of desert in the fact that it doesn't support a biodiverse life. Grass also is a lot of maintenance. You have to mow it at least weekly most of the time to keep it within some bounds. And either you're doing the maintenance or you're hiring somebody to do the maintenance. In addition to, you're paying for water to keep it green, and you're paying for fertilizer to keep it green, and more chemicals to keep things you don't want growing in it out. So there is a lot of cost and maintenance to this. In addition, people don't think about this. Grass over time becomes compacted, partly because it's walked over on a very consistent basis by a mower, the person mowing it. It also doesn't have a chance to have things, different kinds of root structures coming in and out of the earth, because it's all the same, remember? So it kind of becomes compacted and contracts over time. And that does not allow water that comes in the form of rain to absorb into the ground. And so what happens then is it tends to run off and go down gutters, and we lose all of the benefit of the rain that we do get. In addition to those intellectual reasons why you might want to think about turf, there is the aesthetic perception. And it really is hard to lose our love of lawns. We have become accustomed to thinking that's what a well-kept neighborhood should look like. And there presently are not that many good examples of beautiful water-wise gardens. So it is a tension that happens with even people who want to do it, to switch, have difficulty. So you can switch it back to me now, Rosa. Thank you. So where I come into the picture is that when I first moved to California as a young adult, I moved during one of the big droughts in the late 70s, and it really got my attention because I do come from a farming background. And I thought, my gosh, I can't not have any plants in my yard. That just wouldn't do. So what do I need to do, and what do I need to learn? Because I did have to relearn all of the gardening practices that I had learned when I lived in Illinois. And so over time, I began to get more and more self-education. I did work in a wholesale nursery. I have become qualified, which is an EPA certification for knowing how to use different kinds of water systems and how to improve efficiency of the water systems to use the right amount of water and not waste water. In addition to that, I went through training. We have extensive training to become a master gardener over a year period of time, taught by professionals in the horticultural field, and university offers us opportunities to learn things. And then we have to have continuing education after that in order to remain as a master gardener. And my interest leans more on the ornamental and climate appropriate plants, wildlife habitat. So I'm edging and learning more and more into the natives myself. So we have a lot to share. Next slide. So when I was doing the working with different water departments around Southern California, that was earlier in the game of the turf removal program. And they kind of did a few mistakes along the way. They were so busy trying to get people to remove grass that people did. And then what? So what I was seeing was the house that ended up on the left that took everything out of it. And she even took her irrigation out of it, the irrigation line. I don't recommend doing that, by the way. But didn't know what to do. Again, part of that is because aesthetically, we don't know what to do with a giant rectangle that used to be grass. And so when people don't know what to do, they do the next thing, which is the right slide, which is, I don't know what to do, so I'll just carpet it, so to speak, in rock. Well, aesthetically, that's not very good. That does affect property values. In addition to that, it actually makes it hotter. It's harder to walk on. It raises the ambient temperature of the air around you. There is nothing to mitigate winds. Rain, when we have heavy rain, creates a problem. So that wasn't the answer either. So what it is that we need to think about, what do we need to learn to do? Next slide, please. So what we have to do is think about in advance how we're going to transition. And I like to use the word transition rather than change, because transition is a little bit more evolutionary. It's gradual. It's takes less upfront capital initially, because most people don't have, $50,000 to just turn over their landscape. So it gives us a way to kind of keep improving what we're doing as we go along. But if you don't know where you're trying to end up, you make a lot of mistakes along the way. So the first one is, how do we go from looking at a traditional yard, which is on the left, which is basically rectangles of grass with foundation plantings, all about the same color, all about the same size, not a lot of variety. And if you look around most of the neighborhoods, except their most recent new neighborhoods, this is what you're going to see. So what do we want to move to? The house that's on the right is an example of a very good water-wise sustainable yard. Is it perfect? No, but there are elements within that that's going to meet the standards for the turf removal. And as you can see, you're going to end up with a very interesting and yet has a nod toward a traditional feel in a yard. So what they've done here in brief is they have changed the parkway, that's between the street and the sidewalk, to be a no-mow area using water-wise trees and lower plants. Moving to the driveway, they put in what they call permeable hardscape, which means it's got cracks in it that the water can go into and then be absorbed into the ground and not just run off down that driveway into the street. They have put in walls to break things up from an aesthetic point of view, so they can have shorter and taller plants intermixed to make the feel of more of a perennial bed, I'll call it. In this illustration, they've also replaced the turf in that middle section there with a water efficient plantings. I'm going to come to that because that's got a plus and minus to it, but it still keeps an area of what they call negative space in design, which gives your eye a place to rest, and so it makes it more pleasing. So there's some more things we're going to be talking about as I go along today, but that gives you an idea of how you can transition from the looks of I'll call it the old-fashioned standard yard to the new landscape aesthetic. Next slide. So this is another way of looking at how the landscape will change. And I find drawings sometimes help people visualize it differently. It's very hard to stand in front of your yard and remove things from your mind and put new things in. So this is kind of a cross-section of what you will be seeing with the old traditional landscape and where you want to transition to a new, more water-wise landscape. And what it basically boils down to, the standard builder landscape was designed to have no water stay in your property ever. It was always to run it off and get rid of it. It compacts the soil. If any of you have moved into a new development, the soil is, you need pickaxe in order to get through it. At times, weeds don't even grow in it. So it's quite compacted and water runs off. That meets the building standards as well. Well, they have changed some of those policies, and they're encouraging people to do this, to act like you're a mini watershed. You're your own little continent, if you will, and you want to keep the resources on your own continent rather than giving it off to somebody else. So that makes a grading difference of how they shape the land in order to do that. And what you're doing is you're acting more as Mother Nature is. If you go into one of these stream beds that are in our area, you'll notice if you walk on the ground, it's softer, it's spongier. There are hills and valleys where the water can run and collect. And that's what you're trying to create in your yard, so that water will collect in low spots and then sink into the ground, which is why you want permeable paving. And while keeping mulch like nature does when she sheds leaves and things of that nature, if that begins to break down and make the soil more spongy. So that's the big picture view, if you will, of where we're trying to build our soil, so that in addition to that, the native plants can take use of the water and you don't need to use as much supplemental water. So that's why we're going in that direction. Next slide. So starting a water-wise landscape or transitioning into a water-wise landscape is the same as any major project that you have to do. Just like if you were going to remodel your house, you have to have a level of steps involved and in the right order, so you don't have to redo things all the time. You need to look at it from that kind of higher viewpoint. And so I'm going to be picking for the most of, I'm not going to go into a full class on how you project manage landscape transition, but you need to know why you want to do it in the first place. So what is it you're trying to improve? Are you trying to bring more wildlife in? Are you just trying to use less water? Are you trying to create a different environment for your family to gather in that's cooler than it is with what you have now? Are you creating play areas? Do you need to have a space for a dog or for children? So you need to know the big picture of what you're trying to do so that your landscape supports your lifestyle as well. But once you have that in place, because many of your decisions will be based against that why. The next thing that most people don't like to think about is how are you going to pay for it? And it's like anything, you can pay for it in many different ways, but the advantage that you would have, assuming you meet the qualifications, is that the state of California will help you pay for that. And so if you are going to be relying on or taking advantage of the rebates that are available to you to help mitigate some of that cost, we need to know our timing on how that's going to work and how much money that's going to be. So I am going to be talking about that more extensively for this presentation. In addition to that, besides the fact that you need to know what your shade and sun and what kind of soil you have and all of that, you need to have an actual design in place in order to start to receive that rebate. Now, that does not have to be a complicated deal. It can be a self-drawn sketch and it will pass. Or you can have a professional landscape architect do it. So there is a range there, and you don't have to be afraid of it, depending on the size and the complexity of what you're trying to do. Then you have to make sure you're picking the right plants. All plants that go in the state of California have a rating for water use for them. I'm not going to talk about that here, but I will touch on that part a little bit more when we talk about irrigation specifically next time around, because the whole point of irrigation is to support and make your plants thrive. It isn't about putting in a perfectly engineered irrigation system. So then if you have all of that background in place, then it's time to where the rubber meets the road or the shovel meets the dirt. It's time to demo things and be prepared to then put in installation of elements in the right order. So I will be talking about the demo element in regards to lawn removal. So that's kind of the overview of where we're going today. Next slide. I do want to point out a couple of resources that you will want to refer to. These are all free resources. The first one is the Inland Empire Landscape Guidebook. It is available to download online free, and that top link from the Eastern Municipal Water District is one of the places that you can download that. So it is a very good guide. It's very consumer friendly to read. It has delightful pictures that show the processes of things. So I do highly recommend you have a chance to look at that. In addition, every water district that serves customers has information about its rebates that they offer, as well as what Metropolitan Water District offers. Since we're doing this with Western Municipal Water Districts, go to their website, and then you'll learn about the specifics and the details about the rebate program. I'm going to hit the high points, but you'll want to be sure that you're working very closely along the way so that you make sure you qualify for the refund at the end. Excuse me. Next slide. So, what are those requirements? The first thing that I want everyone to understand is you must have existing turf before you start. If you have taken your lawn out, you've missed the boat. So make sure you start at the right spot and not take anything out. There is a little leeway now. If the grass has become ugly or mostly dead, and you have a working irrigation system, that will still qualify. Just be sure that you're fitting that range right. You have to remove a minimum of 250 square feet. It can be more than that, but in order to qualify, they want to get a big enough project going. So it's worth everyone's efforts. You cannot use any synthetic artificial turf. That was another thing that they learned along the way, because artificial turf creates its own problems, most of which is raising the heat index around the house, and it is not biodegradable and has to go to a landfill when it inevitably reaches the end of its life cycle. You also cannot use turf-like plants, and I want to explain what that is. If you look in this illustration to the left, where there's that green grass-like looking area, that is not actual what they call turf grass. That is grass-like plants. So we're going to talk about this as I go on, but you need to know that the turf replacement area that you are using to qualify can't have no turf. That doesn't mean if you're not doing all of your yard in this program, you can't have turf, but you need to be aware that for the program area you're working with, you can't have turf or something that looks remotely like turf. You cannot put any hardscape in unless it's permeable. So that means something that has cracks in it. You must build what they call a water retention feature or filtration feature. And those are fancy words that you could either have a rain barrel or a cistern, so you collect and capture water off your roof and then redirect that water somewhere into your landscape. Or you could build berms and swales into your landscape. You're not going to be making depressions, so that water will run, not necessarily from your roof, but just the landscape in general, into that lower area and then percolate into the ground. There's ways of doing that for different aesthetic reasons as well. And then you have to have a minimum of 3 plants per 100 square feet. Now that is not very many plants, but 3 plants could cover a lot of that area because some plants are really huge. I will caution you from an aesthetic point of view, you don't want to put, 20-foot by 10 or 15-foot shrubs in that area. It will make your house like you're living in, behind a wall of green. So this is just a minimum. It doesn't mean that's all you do or all you can do. And then you must have an approved irrigation system that is water efficient and effective. And I will go into much more detail about that on the next presentation, but I will touch on some of what this means for this one as well. Next slide. So it's a relatively simple process. There's 2 steps, and the 2 steps you need to know is that you need to apply and wait for the approval before you do anything. The rules can change at any time. Once you get the application in and you have approval, that has locked in the rules for you, and it's locked in the money that you are eligible to get. But until that approval comes back to you, you can't really do anything other than get your design finished and figured out. You can't start taking things out and redoing it until that approval has come in if you want your money at the end. And the rebate is after you have it installed. So you will have to find capital in order to get it done, and the reimbursement is after it's been reviewed, because they check to see if you followed it as well. I do want to note 2 more things that you need to have in the big picture. You have 180 days from the minute they give you the approval until it is installed. So you will have to have your ducks in a row in order to get that done, especially depending on how you decide to remove your lawn, which we'll get into. And that be aware that if you get more than $600 in rebate, it is possible you will be paying tax on that. So I want everyone to be aware that that is a possibility. I'm not a tax advisor, so I'm not going to say what is or isn't going to happen there, but I want you to inquire about that so that you're not caught with a surprise when you weren't expecting it. And then to get to the site, this link I have at the bottom is where you'll be directed in order to start this application process. I will also mention that little chat feature they have on the lower left. is extremely responsive. You can ask them any question. They want this to work for you, and they will help you. So take advantage of the constant asking to make sure you're doing things the way that will be beneficial to you. So that's the quick overview of how we get this process started. Next slide. So now I want to talk about turf. And it really does come down to what kind of turf are you using in your landscape. And by and large, the state has decided there's what they call functional live turf and non-functional live turf. And this will become more and more important with new developments going forward. If you already have an existing lawn, this is not a giant push yet, other than the incentive to remove your what they call the non-functional live grass. So the definition is, if it's functional, there is a reason for people to be on the grass. It's recreational, like a soccer field, or it's an area for children to play, like a schoolyard, or if you have children in your own yard, that they play on the grass. Or if you have a space that you need to reserve for dogs to be on, that's functional grass. Non-functional grass is everything else. And to be honest, most front yards never get walked on unless somebody's mowing them. So they're just for looks. That's what we want to eliminate, because that is wasteful. So we have to be sure we're deciding when we're looking at our landscape, what do I actually use as grass and what is just there because it's always been there. I don't know why it's there. So you could, from a design point of view, you can have something that looks a lot like grass that is very water efficient. If you also want to consider, I need an area. In this picture, they decided to reduce their lawn. That's another option. But in that front yard, if you were trying to go for the turf rebate program, that would not be allowed. So again, you're making decisions based on need and wants for you in order to maximize and begin to transition your yard from one thing to something else. So this is a good medium step, I'll say, to reduce the yard. They wouldn't have to do a dramatic change in their irrigation. They need some, but not a lot. They kept their mature shrubs and trees. They worked around that. And then they added a retention area. See, that's that dry stream with a bit of a depression. So water off the gutter from the roof can go in and sink in. So they did a lot of things that were going in the right direction. So that's the two big things to think about of what kind of grass you have. Is it functional or non-functional? Next slide. So I am going to talk about turf alternatives if you need them. Anything that is not cool season Bermuda grass is going to use less water by and large. Some things can use 50% less water and still have a grass-like covering or a ground cover covering. And some can, some of the natives can get by. Oops. Can I go back to that other one? There. Can exist on just rainwater. So the pictures I have here are different types of ways to use what I'm going to call from a design point of view, negative space so it rests your eye. The first one is a plant called Dimondia, and it's a grass-like ground cover, and it never needs to be mowed. It can be walked on, and that's as tall as it gets. The house that's on the upper right was a home that I lived in that I converted. That was a new built home that had turf and foundation plants. And what I used, it's not easy to see here, but behind the fence, I put low shrubs that would just be pruned to be a flat raised area. I'd say they stick up ultimately about 1.5 feet. So it gave the feel of a negative space like a lawn, but they were actually individual shrubs. The bottom left is a field of bunch grass, which does qualify for the water turf or the turf replacement program because those are individual large plants, lots of little tiny plants. And to the right is one where they have used brown mulch and permeable hardscapes to act as the brace without it being just a big square rectangle. So they're using some artistry in this with it looks like pavers and pea gravel is what it looks like. You could do that with decomposed granite. So it's giving a feel of open space, but it's not just a plump in the middle of your yard. And again, we can't use any synthetic grass because for the program. Next slide. This is just a way to look at your yard differently. This is actually some of the designs that are on the Western Municipal Water District site. Many water districts, you can go to any water district you want, often has design templates that might give you some ideas if you're kind of stuck with how do you design it. In this case, the picture on the left is they decided to take out all of the grass in the backyard, but because it may have been a homeowners association where they still had policy rules that you needed to keep your turf in the front yard to maintain the look of the neighborhood, they decided to do only slight modification in the front yard and still keep their grass. Picture on the right is kind of reversing that. That's like they didn't need it in the front yard because it was non-functional, just turf grass, but they had kids, so they wanted a play area. So they reduced the lawn in the back and still kept some lawn. So just ways to think about how you want to use this. From the turf removal program, you're either doing the front yard area and it could qualify, or you're doing the backyard and qualifying. So again, you have choice in here on what you want to do. Next slide. You just want to make sure that you're putting in climate appropriate plants. And by that, they could go by many different names, but the turf replacement program will have a list of plants that will be acceptable. So you'll be sure you're getting the right kind. But there are 5 regions of the world that have what we would call drought tolerant or friendly plants here. So you can use any of those plants that are from those regions that fit in. They're either in South Africa, in Chile, Australia, the Mediterranean basin, I'm sorry, and of course, California natives. So you have an immense plant palette from which to choose. Next slide. If you are really going to go all the way with native plants, it is very hard to figure out how to design with those. There are not a lot of good examples, but these 3 websites that I've found will give you tremendous leap forward in how to do that. So the example on the left is 100% native plants. And if you look at it, it is very traditional in its appeal as well. The advantage that you're going to have with this type of a landscape is that because there's plant, the heights are so that it all leads toward the front of the house without masking the house. And you're going to have plants that have different bloom times. So something will bloom, in winter, something will bloom in summer, something, so it's a dynamic and changes and it draws different pollinators at different times of the year. So they're very friendly for our making a beautiful home, and it's giving you a kind of a paint by numbers approach with plants and how many to plant. So it's a very good resource. So I wanted to bring that out if you are considering going completely to the native side of the house. There's less resources available. Next slide. So this is critical. You need to know what your plants are going to be before you can design your irrigation system. That is not how it's been done with the traditional lawns. They usually put in those, PVC pipes and the heads everywhere, and then put the sod on. That is not how you're going to design your irrigation to meet the plants. So that is why it's also critical that you have your design determined at the time you apply for the turf replacement program. So there are many ways to do that, depending on what kind of time and effort you want to put into watering. If you want to go the a commando route of all natives, basically you're just gonna allow Mother Nature to take care of your lawn. The caution around that is when you're putting in native plants and their babies, it takes almost 3 years for them to establish. And you're gonna have to water those during that 3 years. After that, you can taper that off and then allow Mother Nature to take over. So you're gonna have to think about how you're going to do that. Are you gonna work with what they call rain gardens, where it's going to have flooding conditions and then drying out conditions? Again, that's going to probably be Mother Nature managed ultimately, but you need to know what plants can survive in that environment. Then are you gonna hand water everything? And honestly, there is nothing wrong with hand watering. It's actually quite efficient, but it is also quite a commitment. And there's ways around that that's kind of a mashup between hand watering and overhead spray. You can make temporary spray heads so that it can water and do it. You can also do it with weeping hoses or irrigation that has holes punched in some manner, and move those around and do that once a month, again, depending on what the plants are and if they're established. And then, of course, you can go to drip watering, and there's 2 different ways to do drip watering. All of it has to do with low flow water directed either directly at the roots of an individual plant or over the entire landscape so the roots can spread out. We'll talk about that a lot more in the next presentation. So this is what you have to, at least from a big picture idea, know how are you going to supplement, or if you're going to supplement, the plants that are in your yard. Next slide. So now we're to the nitty-gritty of how do you move the grass. It is not for the faint of heart. It is a long process, usually. It's also a labor-intensive process. The difference is you make sure you've got your funding. Again, as I said earlier, if you're doing the rebate, don't take it out until you know you've got the money been approved. But how you're going to take it out will depend on the time of year that you're starting the project, and that you have to hit that 180 day mark for installation, because some of these methods may not allow you to do that. The advantage of doing it with some of the different ways is it can build the soil at the same time. Otherwise, you may have to also add that as a step to build the soil up, unless you're using natives, and then you don't want to do that. So you can see it's like when you ask a consultant, how do I do something? Well, that depends. Unfortunately, that is the actual answer. It's not avoiding the answer. So we have to do it specifically to what you're accomplishing, your timeline, the money you have involved. So we have to know all of those factors. And it will change your gardening practices from the way you've been doing it if you had traditional yard to the transition to the natives. And then you will be a hero, because I can tell you, your neighbors will notice what you're doing. And they probably will ask you a lot of questions. And you might even inspire them when they see what a beautiful job you've done. And yeah, then be a leader in your group and be part of the solution. Next slide. So the first thing you're going to have to know is what kind of grass do you have? And it's important. So again, the 2 big buckets on knowing is it a cool season grass or is it a warm season grass? It is actually pretty easy to get rid of cool season grass. It is difficult to nearly impossible on the warm season. So what do I mean by that? Cool season grass means it's usually growing in the cooler months. It stays green all year round, the laser with water. It tends to have finer blades, and that is like the grass that's in the person's hand. So you have those little fine blades, you have to mow them off a lot. They are some form of bluegrass or ryegrass, or what you traditionally find in sod rolls if you go to Home Depot. That's cool season grasses. Most lawns don't look that beautiful, and there's some form of weeds, which is crabgrass, which you can see has a much thicker blade on it. In addition, it kind of grows in a clump and then spreads out with like these runners. That it's actually not too hard to dig out crabgrass, but if your whole yard is crabgrass, we're going to work with something else. And the warm season grasses. The example that I have here, it's kind of hard to tell, on the left is a grass called St. Augustine. And it grows by spreading stolons, which if you look to the right, that's Bermuda grass, which has those stolons. You can see them growing out, and that's how it spreads. If it was just at the surface of the spreading, that would be easy, but those roots can go down almost 6 feet. That's why this gets difficult on how you remove this kind of grass. If you don't know what kind of grass you have, take a few samples, either go to a nursery and show it, and keep it in a baggie so you don't spread anything. Or call the master gardeners, take it to one of the events, and a master gardener can help you. Bring pictures so they can see the root structure and how it spreads. And we can help you decide, at least if it's cool or warm season, probably pretty good, and guide you on maybe which way you should approach this. Next slide. So the first way to do it is smothering it. It's often also called sheet mulching or lasagna layering. It is the most ecological beneficial because you're not killing anything but the turf. You're not killing the soil. You're not killing other plants that you want to keep. It looks neat when you're done while the process is happening. So it has a lot of things that work well. It works best if you do it when it's warmer, but you can do it any time of year. The difference between those is the length of time it takes. If it's cooler, it takes longer. If it's warmer, it takes less time. What you're doing is not allowing any light into the plant so it can't photosynthesize, and that's what kills it. That's why it's called smothering. It's removing light from the process. And it can easily take 6 months. That's why this may or may not work if you're trying to go with the rebate program, because you might only just get your lawn killed and then you haven't got it installed. So it's not the ideal method if you're trying to put in desert or chaparral plants at the end. So again, that will determine whether this is a good option for you. And then you have to watch it, because if these dry out, these organic, it has to be organic mulch on top of cardboard. That's the process. It's cardboard or painter's paper, 2 or 3 layers of that paper laid out, and then you top that with about 6 inches of organic, which means wood chips. Make sure they're not the ones that have dye in them. Make sure they're, or they're good quality mulch, and you just let nature take its course, and it will break down. You can plant in it immediately because it's just cardboard, so you can dig in it and get plants in. So that's the general gist of what you need to know about the smother it process and the lasagna layering. Next slide. Then here's the bake it method. This one does kill the sods and weeds because it's actually cooking the plants in the top about 2 inches of soil. So it does kill the biological life in the soil. So when you're finished with this, you have to enrich your soil and bring life back. But it does a very good job of killing the plants that you're smothering. It has to be done in the heat of summer. So if you did it now, it wouldn't work. It just sit there and do nothing. What you have to do is thoroughly wet everything down, then put clear plastic. It's about 1 millimeter thick, so it has to be thick enough that it won't tear easily. And then you have to put bricks and stuff along the edge, because you cannot let it has to be sealed down. And then you just let the sun cook it. So it is ugly to look at if it's in your front yard. So it works again on the cool season very well. But again, the roots can hold on life way deep in the soils, because it's only killing the top 2 inches, remember? So it's not a good option if you have warm season grasses. Next. Then there's the old fashioned back-breaking work of digging it out. It is the fastest method. It's the most effective method with the speed if you have cool season grasses, because you literally just slice under the roots. You only go down about 2 or 3 inches and just slice it off. If you're doing it by a shovel, which is effective, it is hard work. I have done this method, and I can tell you what's hard work. You can buy sod cutters, or I don't mean buy it, rent them. And that makes the work much easier. The thing of it is you're gonna have a lot of sod left that doesn't compost, and you're gonna have to take that to a landfill. So that's the negative to it. And if you have a large area, you can use skip loaders to bring it up too. You can rototill, that breaks things up. I think that's a little harder on the removal side, but it does break up cool season grasses. So again, this, if you need the time, this is the way to do it fastest. But it doesn't work, again, very well on those warm season grasses. Next. Unfortunately, this is what works on warm season grasses, poison. And as a master gardener, we are very reluctant to recommend herbicides. But sometimes that's what you need to do. If you don't necessarily need to do this on St. Augustine, because if you're a little diligent with using the mechanical methods to bring it up, and then kind of when something pops up, doing it again a time or two, you can pretty well get rid of St. Augustine. But Bermuda, it is a native grass that can just be really, really hard, and it can get into little cracks and hang on. So you have to really be diligent, sometimes for years, about the weeding on that. So it is mass death, but for everything. And you want to be especially careful. I wouldn't recommend a spray of this indiscriminate size if you're trying to keep those perimeter plants alive, because it will drift in wind. So again, you do this when there is no wind out, and you get it as close to the ground so it doesn't overspray into an area you don't want. And you do wear that protective gear. You don't want that to be absorbed into your skin. It is kind of the method of last resort, but it absolutely works. So again, you have to weigh the factors of your timing, what kind of grass, how fast, and it works best also when the plants are actively growing. If they're dormant, if you did it now on Bermuda, it wouldn't kill them. You have to wait till it gets hot. And then you need one, you might need up to 3 shots of it. You would like kill it. Let's say it's August, which would be perfect time. You'd spray it, see what dies, spray it again, see what dies, and that might do it. And if not, you might have a little bit, you need to do it 3 times. So it does add up an expense for that too. So again, depends on how big an area you're talking. All righty, next slide. So that was a fast introduction. If you go back to download the landscape guide that I had at the beginning of the presentation, it's an entire book on how to do this. You can get the help, of course, along the way from the website for the rebate program. But in general, here's what you want to do is you want to make sure you apply and get your funding first. Then you're going to move the grass. Then you're going to start installation. The first thing you have to do is what's that water capture, because that could be some earth moving elements. Put in your hardscape that's permeable, because that you have to have that infrastructure in place. You would next at least have to have your water valves in place. You may or may not have lines out into the yard, depending on what plants you've chosen. But you have to have the installation from the water meter for the valves for the irrigation. Then you're going to do your planting. Then if you're doing drip irrigation, then you run the lines to the plants, and then you apply mulch, and then you submit that you've completed the project. So that's kind of the big picture. The fine devil is in some of the details. So be sure you're working with the water district to make sure you're doing things properly for your removal installation, and then receive your money in the end. So with that fast overview, were there any questions, Melanie, that came up?
It was only one, but I had answered that. Maria wanted to know where she could see this video again. So I did tell her, and I'm letting everyone else know that it is being recorded, and you can go to the Western Water website where you had signed up for this, and you should be able to find it there. I'm not sure for the master gardeners if we have it on VMS, but you can still also go to the Western Municipal Water or Western Water website. And Lynn, and let me say this really quick. I'm sorry for this background noise. I have dogs trying to get in the room, but we have an excellent expert here. She's very knowledgeable. And so if any questions you have would be the time to ask her right now. Of course, she's going to be coming back in February, on February 10th to do part 2. But again, you know, you have an excellent, a knowledgeable person here. So I said, whatever questions you have, even if you think it's too small, to go ahead and ask her right now. She might win the lottery and she might not come back February 10th. So get the information we can out of her right now.
Well, people are thinking and hopefully typing something in. I am going to make a comment about how, if you're using natives and you have a plant that dies in your current landscape and you want to replace it with a native plant, that is usually not successful. And the reason that it's not usually successful is that you are not matching plants that have the same water use. So if you took out a daylily and put in a toyin, it would be overwatered and it would drown it and kill it. Because you've been irrigating toward the daylily needs, and the toyin doesn't need that much water, and it actually drowns California native plants. If you remove all of your lawn, you need to remember that like sun and water needs, plants need to be with like sun and water needs plants. I will talk a little bit more about that in regards to irrigation, because remember I said you match the supplemental irrigation to the needs of the plant. So the plant is the king here, and you want to make sure that you don't just plop plants around, because you'll have a lot of learning mistakes. So I just wanted to let that know, but it's especially true with natives. They're a lot more particular compared to these exotic plants that we've gotten used to gardening with. If there are no more questions, I think we've reached the end of the road.
I was going to say, Lynn, well, this is probably the thing. Either they're asleep out there, which I doubt that they are, but I think because your presentation was so thorough and very, you know, you went through the whole process that people are like, you know what, I can do this. So I look at it that way. That's how come you're not getting any questions, because you answered them through your presentation. And Jeffrey showed up, so Jeffrey probably has some things he wants to add. I'll be quiet, Jeffrey, because
I'm sorry, I did forget to talk about a possible survey for those that are coming, that have registered for this. So you have the option to answer it or not, but what it is for the Master Gardener program to show that we are helping people change the way that they're gardening.
Well, that was an excellent presentation, Lynn. Like Melody said, I feel like you covered everything. I had some things that I had planned to bring up at the end, and you totally went over everything. So
Thank you.
for myself, I would just like to say thank you so much for your time, for Melody and Rosa for your volunteering time and getting this all together. And I'm happy that everybody was able to come in and listen to this, because removing the grass is probably one of the hardest steps to get your landscape more water efficient and getting that grass out. So you touched on some really good points. I would just recommend everybody to not forget about the SoCal Water Smart rebates. If you go to SoCalWatersmart.com, you can check which rebates you qualify for. And if you're a Western Water customer, you could also go there to SoCalWatersmart.com or the Western Water CA .com website where you'll see the Western Water rebates. You could also call me. My name is Jeffrey Diaz. You can call me here at Western Water, and I can help you out with any of your rebate needs if you have any questions. Does Rosa or Melody have anything else to plug in?
No, just thank you very much, Lynn. It was a wonderful presentation. And thank you, Melody, for answering the questions or monitoring the chat. Jeffrey, great job. Thank you. Great teamwork.
I want to say one thing, you know, I always have some say, I just want to thank everybody for showing up early on Saturday after the new year and everything coming out to listen. So please keep your eyes open for more of the workshops coming through, and hope to see you at the next one, which is
Wonderful.
February 10th. That's going to be part 2 with Lynn again. And bring your questions, please. Yep.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, really excited, and I hope to see everybody there for February 10th workshop on irrigation. And thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.
All right, take care, everyone.